Hello, fellow soil stewards and garden enthusiasts. Welcome back to the Humus Heritage, where we dig deep into the timeless wisdom that makes our gardens thrive. Today we're embarking on an extraordinary journey that will fundamentally change how you think about composting. Forget everything you think you know about composting. For centuries, gardeners have been missing out on revolutionary techniques that go far beyond the typical backyard bin. Join us as we journey back in time to reveal the forgotten art of ancient composting, promising a fundamental shift in how you approach soil health and sustainable living. Your garden and the planet will thank you. There's a curious blind spot in modern gardening culture that rarely gets discussed. We've become so enamored with sleek plastic tumblers, specialized bins, and precise carbon-to-nitrogen ratios that we've completely overlooked the sophisticated composting systems our ancestors perfected over millennia. These weren't primitive attempts at waste management, but rather elegant, deeply understood methods of soil enrichment that sustained entire civilizations. While we congratulate ourselves on our scientific understanding, we're often creating inferior compost compared to what farmers produced thousands of years ago using nothing but observation, patience, and an intimate relationship with their land. The modern composting movement, for all its environmental benefits, has narrowed our perspective dramatically. We've reduced this ancient art to a simple equation: kitchen scraps plus yard waste plus time equals garden gold. But this oversimplification misses the profound sophistication of historical composting techniques that worked with natural systems rather than trying to optimize them. Our ancestors understood something we're only beginning to rediscover through soil science. That building healthy soil isn't just about decomposition, it's about creating living ecosystems that sustain themselves across generations. The techniques we're about to explore offer benefits that go far beyond what your backyard tumbler can provide, including superior water retention, enhanced microbial diversity, long-term carbon sequestration, and nutrient availability that persists for decades rather than seasons. The story of composting is as old as agriculture itself, woven into the fabric of every successful civilization that learned to work with the earth rather than against it. Ancient Roman agricultural texts, particularly those written by Columella and Cato the Elder, contained detailed instructions for creating what they called sterquilinium, carefully managed compost heaps that combined animal manures, crop residues, and household waste in specific proportions. These weren't casual pile-and-forget affairs, but sophisticated systems that Romans understood were the foundation of their agricultural prosperity. They recognized that soil fertility wasn't a given, but a carefully cultivated resource that required constant attention and replenishment. Perhaps nowhere is the power of ancient composting more dramatically illustrated than in the Amazon basin, where indigenous peoples created what we now call Terra Preta, or Amazonian dark earth. This isn't ordinary soil, but a human-made growing medium so fertile and enduring that it has maintained its productivity for over 2,000 years. Scientists studying these soils have discovered they contain up to 3 times more organic matter and nutrients than surrounding soils, and remarkably, they appear to regenerate themselves. The secret lies in the combination of charcoal, bones, manure, and organic waste that ancient Amazonians carefully incorporated into the earth, creating a self-sustaining microbial ecosystem. Indigenous agricultural practices across North America similarly demonstrate sophisticated composting knowledge. The Three Sisters planting method of corn, beans, and squash wasn't just companion planting, but a complete nutrient cycling system where each plant contributed to soil health. Native farmers would mound soil mixed with fish remains, wood ash, and decomposed plant matter, creating small hills that provided excellent drainage while concentrating nutrients exactly where growing plants needed them. Long before European contact brought new agricultural methods, These communities had perfected systems that maintained soil fertility indefinitely without external inputs. Even more fascinating, ancient civilizations across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East all independently developed remarkably similar composting principles, suggesting these techniques represent fundamental truths about how healthy soil ecosystems function. Sheet composting, sometimes called lasagna gardening, represents one of the most elegant ancient techniques that modern gardeners are only beginning to rediscover. Rather than collecting organic materials in a separate pile, this method involves building compost directly where you want to grow, layering materials like a lasagna to create gradually decomposing beds. Ancient farmers would lay down cardboard-like materials such as old reed mats, or thick layers of leaves, then alternate between nitrogen-rich materials like manure or green plant matter, and carbon-rich materials like straw or dried vegetation. Each layer contributes to the final composition while creating different microclimates that support various beneficial organisms. The genius of this system is that it requires virtually no turning, no hauling compost from one place to another, and it suppresses weeds while building soil simultaneously. By the time you're ready to plant, the bottom layers have already transformed into rich humus, while the upper layers continue protecting and feeding the soil below. Keyhole gardens and Hugelkultur beds represent ancient engineering solutions to common gardening challenges that, honestly, feel remarkably modern in their ingenuity. Keyhole gardens, which were developed in African communities dealing with water scarcity, feature a circular raised bed with a composting basket at the center, creating a keyhole-shaped access path. As organic waste decomposes in the central basket, nutrients leach directly into the surrounding growing area, while the raised bed design improves drainage and, makes gardening accessible even on poor soil. Hugelkultur, a technique with roots in Eastern European and Germanic agricultural traditions, takes a different approach by creating raised beds over buried wood. Large logs and branches are laid down as the bed's foundation, covered with smaller organic materials, then topped with soil and compost. As the wood slowly decomposes over years or even decades, it acts like a sponge, absorbing water during wet periods and releasing it during dry spells, while continuously feeding the soil above with nutrients. These beds become more fertile with each passing season, basically creating self-sustaining growing systems that improve rather than deplete over time. The use of biochar represents perhaps the most scientifically fascinating ancient composting technique, one that modern researchers are only now beginning to fully understand. Biochar is simply charcoal that's been created through a specific process of burning organic material at high temperatures with limited oxygen, producing a carbon-rich substance that's incredibly stable and porous. Ancient peoples across South America, Asia, and Africa all discovered that adding this material to their compost and soil created dramatic improvements in fertility that persisted for generations. The microscopic structure of biochar provides an enormous surface area that becomes home to beneficial microorganisms, while its chemical properties help retain nutrients that would otherwise wash away. Unlike regular organic matter that decomposes relatively quickly, biochar can persist in soil for hundreds or even thousands of years, continuously supporting soil life and holding onto nutrients. When combined with compost, it creates a synergy that enhances both materials, with the biochar providing long-term structure, and the compost providing immediate nutrition and microbial diversity. Integrating these ancient techniques into your contemporary garden doesn't require abandoning your current setup or making dramatic changes all at once. Start by thinking of your garden as a collection of opportunities rather than a fixed system. That corner where grass struggles to grow could become a sheet composting experiment, while that pile of fallen branches might be the foundation for your first Hugelkultur bed. The beauty of these ancient methods is, honestly, their flexibility and scalability. You can build a small keyhole garden in an urban backyard, or, create extensive sheet composting areas across acres of land. Begin where you are, with what you have, and let these techniques prove themselves in your own soil. Our ancestors composted a far wider range of materials than we typically consider today, and honestly, there's tremendous wisdom in their inclusive approach. Beyond kitchen scraps and grass clippings, consider hair from haircuts, natural fiber clothing that's beyond repair, ashes from untreated wood fires, feathers from poultry keeping, and even paper products like cardboard and newspaper printed with soy-based inks. Ancient composters would have included everything from wool scraps to leather trimmings, recognizing that anything that once lived can feed the soil again. The key is understanding the difference between materials that decompose quickly and those that break down slowly, then using each appropriately. Fast decomposing materials provide immediate nutrients and heat up your compost, while slow decomposing materials create long-term structure and sustained nutrient release. You know, a lot of the frustrations people face with modern composting really come from trying to force these natural processes into, well, artificial timelines or conditions. The thing is, ancient composters didn't stress about getting that perfect carbon to nitrogen ratio or keeping their piles at a specific temperature. Instead, they focused on working with larger volumes and a wide diversity of materials. So, if your compost pile just isn't heating up, ancient wisdom would say you're probably trying to compost too small a quantity. Traditional compost heaps, they were pretty substantial, often several cubic yards of material. That kind of volume generates enough internal heat, thanks to microbial activity, to really break things down efficiently. And, you know, if your compost is too wet or too dry, the fix isn't some complicated chemistry set. It's just a matter of adding more varied materials. Wet, slimy compost? Mix in some carbon-rich dry stuff. If it's dusty and slow to decompose, add moisture and nitrogen-rich materials. By thinking like an ancient composter, using bigger piles and more diverse materials, a lot of the modern composting headaches just fade away. Building truly regenerative soil with these ancient techniques, well, it creates benefits that actually compound over time in ways that modern, year-to-year composting just can't match. When you set up a Hugelkultur bed or add biochar to your growing spaces, you're not only feeding this season's plants, you're really building soil ecosystems that will keep getting better for years and years down the road. This represents a fundamental shift from the extractive mindset of conventional gardening, where we constantly need to add external inputs to maintain fertility, toward a regenerative approach where the soil itself becomes increasingly alive and productive. Your garden transforms from something you must constantly maintain into a living system that largely maintains itself, requiring less water, fewer amendments, and less intervention with each passing season, while producing more abundant and nutritious crops. The economic implications of adopting these ancient composting techniques extend far beyond your garden gate. By utilizing materials you already have and often pay to dispose of, you're converting waste streams into valuable resources. Those bags of leaves your neighbors set at the curb become the carbon layers in your sheet composting. That pile of branches from tree trimming becomes a Hugelkultur foundation. Kitchen scraps that would cost money to send to a landfill instead become the basis for rich, living soil. Over time, as your soil becomes more fertile and water retentive, you'll spend less on water bills, fertilizers, and replacement plants, while your garden produces more food and beauty. The environmental benefits mirror these economic gains, as you're sequestering carbon in your soil rather than releasing it through decomposition elsewhere, reducing methane emissions from landfills, and creating habitat for beneficial insects and soil organisms that support broader ecosystem health. This brings us to the heart of why reconnecting with ancient composting wisdom matters so profoundly. We're not just learning techniques, but reclaiming a relationship with soil that modern life has caused us to forget. Every time you layer materials for sheet composting or add biochar to your beds, you're participating in an unbroken chain of knowledge stretching back thousands of years. You're joining a global movement of gardeners who understand that the health of our soil directly determines the health of our communities and our planet. These aren't just gardening methods but acts of stewardship that honor both past wisdom and future generations who will inherit the earth we're building today. If this journey into ancient composting wisdom has inspired you, I encourage you to start experimenting with these techniques in your own garden. Document what you discover, share your experiences with fellow gardeners, and help revive these powerful methods that have sustained human communities for millennia. Please subscribe to the Humus Heritage for more deep dives into timeless gardening wisdom, and share this video with anyone who cares about building healthy, living soil. Together, we can transform our gardens and our world, one handful of humus at a time. Until next time, keep digging deeper and happy composting.